You're listening to The Practicing Law Librarian. This limited series is part of PLI's Ever Current podcast, where we bring you insights and updates from legal thought leaders. Find additional episodes at pli.edu or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Karen Osterly. Welcome to the Practicing Law Librarian podcast, presented by PLI's Legal Information Services Group. This podcast brings you conversations with and for the law librarian community. As a practicing law librarian myself, I've been working in legal information services for 34 years, currently with PLI's Library Relations Group. For this episode, I was overjoyed to talk with an old friend, Mike Saint-Onge. He was my client when I was a new Matthew Bender rep, and later we worked together at Lexis for quite a while. His learnings from 19 years as a Lexis library relations consultant were quite revealing. With Mike, we focused on several very different librarian roles, including his first jobs, his library relations consultant work, and now Director of Research Training and Engagement. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, Michael. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for joining me today. I think that we met in the fall of 1989. And so that's been a little while.
A long time.
So I pulled your bio from www.org, and I did not remember that you were at Crowell & Mooring. Was that your first job in San Francisco before Couder?
No, Crowell & Mooring was in D.C. I had gone to Catholic University in D.C. for my library degree, and I met Ellen Callanan, who was the newly installed director of the library at Crowell & Mooring. So it was my first professional job out of library school.
Okay. And then you went to Kelly Dry.
Then I went to Kelly Dry.
Which is where we met.
Right.
And I love this story. Like you said, you were a baby librarian, and I was a brand new Matthew Bender rep. Didn't know anything. But we, figured it out together. It was great.
We did.
It was great. And then you went to San Francisco.
I went to Couder Brothers and was there for a number of years.
Yeah.
And then had an opportunity to move into the corporate sector for LexisNexis. I was very interested in working with librarians, and this was a librarian relations job. So I got to work with the librarian customers, keeping them up to date on all things Lexis. It was really a great opportunity for me, because by that time I was really involved in AALL and really excited about my profession. And here was a job that actually allowed me to do exactly what I wanted to do, which was work with librarians and volunteer and speak and all those other things that firms, some firms are not as excited about librarians getting involved in that stuff.
Okay, well, I always wondered why you went, because it seemed that working in a firm, was something you were enjoying before that.
Very much, yeah.
Okay, but librarians and reference works?
Yeah, and I really respected the librarian relations team and the management, and it was just a great opportunity. And I stayed 19 years.
Yes,
yes. Was quite a surprise to me as well.
Yes.
Time passed very quickly. So
exactly. So do I remember right that your territory to cover as a library relations consultant was everything west of the Mississippi?
It was pretty much, yeah. At one point I had Texas on over. I didn't have Chicago, but I had Texas, Southern, Central, and the South, and the West.
But
so that meant a lot of travel, which used to be more fun. It got less fun the older I got. It was a little harder. But it was a great experience. It was really, and as I said, the chance to meet so many librarians and work closely with them. And one of the things I loved about it was my librarian customers were really tough. The product really had to meet their standards. There was no razzle-dazzle pretending like it was perfect. They would tell you when there was something missing from the product or it wasn't exactly what they expected, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I respected that. I think it's much more discriminating audience than many attorneys, because librarians really know and will say when something isn't working the way it's supposed to.
Right.
But they're also very, appreciative of products when they do work and meet the expectations. So it was great.
Good. Well, I know you covered Idaho, but you're right. I forgot you didn't have Chicago because Bridget was there and still is, I
Right.
think. Yeah, it's a fabulous group. So that is interesting. I didn't realize that you were still at Lexis after I left because I got there in 1989 and left in 2014. And you left in
2017.
Okay, all right. So there was one of the reorganizations that I didn't
Right.
survive.
That's right.
That happens. Our department was eliminated. But by that time, following your lead, I had gotten my library degree and realized that I wanted that to be my second career.
Right.
But to me, I was vendor and then librarian and then vendor again. And isn't that funny? So you were firms and then vendor and then firms again. To me,
Right.
it all feels unified. It all
Right.
feels like one career. And for you?
Well, I've always said that, and that was really frustrating sometimes because people would say to me, introduce me and say, "Oh, this is Mike. He used to be a librarian." I go, "Well,
I'm
I'm
still a
still first,
librarian.
they didn't take the degree away from me when I went to work for a vendor, and secondly, I work with legal materials. I teach and train, which librarians do all the time. How am I not a librarian?
Right.
I don't have a physical library, but guess what? There are lots of librarians that don't have physical libraries anymore.
Yep.
So that distinction was always so frustrating because it's like I'm still a librarian,
Right.
and I'm proud to be a librarian.
Me too. I don't need the different term. I don't need a different
No, I
name.
I've always been proud to be a librarian. And it's interesting when you tell people, a couple of reactions when you tell people you're a librarian. If they're not familiar with what librarians do, they'll say something stupid like, "Oh, I should have been a librarian. I love to read." If they know what librarians do, especially in the legal or corporate environment, they'll say, "Oh, what a great job. That would be really exciting," because they realize how important information is in the lifeblood of a law firm or a law school or a corporation, and then they appreciate the role of the librarian. It's not just sitting around reading all day, which would, by the way, I would love that job. I just don't have that job, but
Yeah, it doesn't pay very well.
it doesn't pay very well.
And you live in LA. We need to make a living,
That's right. That's right.
But what made you go from Lexis to a firm?
Well, it was time. It was
Okay.
one of those things. It was time.
Okay.
I had an opportunity to go to Morgan Lewis. I jumped ship from Lexis. It was just time to do something different. The travel was difficult. I had some things in my personal life that made it challenging to be gone 3 weeks out of every month, which was about my usual travel. So I
Right.
needed to bring it home a little. I had a spouse that was ill at the time. So I needed to be home more. And so it was quite the change back to
Yeah.
a setting, an office where you had to go in 5 days a week. And so that was quite the challenge. But it was also a great opportunity to work with people people I respect and admired. And Morgan Lewis was a great firm
Yep.
to join. They had recently, about a year or two before, combined with Bingham McCutcheon,
Oh, that's
brought over
right.
their attorneys. About 900 people came over from Bingham to join
Right.
Morgan. So it really was an exciting time. It felt like we were moving from really decentralized departments into a much more unified department. Pretty exciting stuff. So, and then originally I was a regional director for Morgan and I handled the California offices,
Oh,
but I was also tasked with doing teaching and training, hand out materials, that kind of stuff, which was always my first love. So I was trying to do both jobs, and found that a little frustrating just because I was pulled in multiple directions. And then, much to my delight, they created a position for director of research training and engagement for me. And so now my job is really working with the firm to create opportunities for training. And it only came about, Karen, I'll be honest with you, really because of COVID.
oh.
We had this tremendous shift. Librarians have been trying to move people
Electronic.
onto electronic resources for a long time, and there
Right.
was always the reluctance. But suddenly we couldn't get to the hard copies in our libraries. There was nobody doing filing. There was nobody there to help get access. So all of a sudden, attorneys were forced to get to their resources electronically. And because, unfortunately, all the different protocols from different vendors it's not that easy to go from one vendor to the next. It really
Right.
does require some teaching and training,
Right.
or at least some handouts and materials that helps make the transition easier. So it was one of those things. It's like, wow, our attorneys are now accessing things in ways they never accessed before, and that we really need somebody to help ease that print to digital transition. And it was an exciting time. Now, a couple years into it, I'm happy to say it is much easier, that the jolt is over. People are used to accessing things electronically. We still have some hangers on that love to have print, but it's just much more convenient from a management position to buy something once, make it available to the entire firm electronically.
Right. Right. And you had quite a bit of experience with training those 19 years.
We did, right, right. That was my real interest. So one of the things that I learned a long time ago, and I'm going to mention a name from somebody that has been gone a while, Marie Wallace. Did you ever meet Marie? Do you know
No,
her at all?
no.
She was a law firm librarian, and I remember early on when I started at Lexis, she was telling the story about that teaching and training is really storytelling. And that once I made that switch in my head, that it's not just simply, here's this product, blah, blah, blah. You need to say, here's the problem, here's the challenge,
Right.
here's how this product or this service or whatever answers that challenge. And so it's much more engaging than simply rote walking through the product. It engages people more. So I've always liked that idea of storytelling and try to incorporate that into my own presentations.
No, I like that. I've not heard that in this context.
And then at Lexis, we had a director of sales, VP of sales, who was also really good about uh, listening and discovering attorneys or users' pain points, and then working from that. Here's what I'm hearing. Here's how this product will help, or it may not at this point, but we're hoping it will eventually, kind of thing. So it's really about a give and take, and not just a simply departing information, my font of knowledge kind of thing. So
Right. We talk about Keith.
yes,
Yes, he was great. He was great. And I want to shout out a couple of people at Morgan Lewis Bockius too. And I think some of them are retired now, but Connie Smith and Linda Jean Schneider and Diane Kabulian in New York.
Yes.
A wonderful group to work with. But you're right. When I started taking care of them, because they were, a client all these years, it was mostly centralized in Philadelphia. But then with the Bingham McCutcheon merger or absorption, whatever you want to call it, it got even bigger. So I wanted to ask you, what is engagement? I love your title, Director of Research, Training, and Engagement. And I wanted to say, what do they mean by engagement at Morgan Lewis Bockius?
Well, I know, I love that title too. It's really about getting in front of the attorneys and showing them the research. It's not just training. It's really about, again, trying to meet their needs. What are the pain points of the attorneys, and how can we address those from a research services standpoint? So that's not just training in the strictest sense, but one of the things that we learned was we created practice group pages on our intranet that are dealing specifically with the resources that are available for that practice group. And I was particularly proud of this because I think it really does show Morgan's commitment to meeting the attorneys where they are. They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So if they're familiar with one online service and they go strictly to that, they don't know and they're not all the same. I think one of the things that's frustrating, and we know as librarians that the vendors are not interchangeable. Oh, one is just as good as the other. It's that each vendor brings its own set of resources and strengths and weaknesses to the table. We created practice pages, if you will, that surfaced the practical guidance material for all of the various vendors and broke it down by subject. So here was, for example, labor and employment hiring practices. Here were the practical guidance materials from Lexis and Westlaw and Bloomberg and Vital
PLI.
Law and PLI. Yeah, absolutely. And so put those kinds of resources so it's just a click away. so that attorneys who were interested in those practical guidance materials could just click on what they were interested in. So yeah, absolutely. And PLI, we know PLI is a great resource, but getting that information in front of the attorney sometimes is very hard for us. But if we create tools that help prompt them and remind them, don't just look in one place and say, oh, that's it, I've done that there are lots of resources out there, and trying to get them engaged in that is part of my job as well.
Great. Now, you guys are what we call a privileged member, which is to say all the CLEs, programs that all of your attorneys are required to complete in all the states. We have all that. And then you guys also have Plus, but I think that they had that before you came on board. Was that already?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how is it to use PLI Plus?
Great stuff. I mean, it really is great content, very easy to use. I think, there is always room for improvement from our side of getting people involved. I mean, we are always knocking at the door. I think there probably isn't a librarian alive that says, oh, that says I have complete unfettered access to attorneys and I can access them or I can engage them anytime I want. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
I know they're very busy.
Right.
And we struggle to get in front of them and get their attention just as other departments do. And that's always a challenge. We used to find that doing in-person presentations with food used to work. That doesn't work anymore. First of all, because they're not in the office. And so
Right.
it has to be online.
Right.
So you can't entice them with food or goodies or swag anymore. But so it's always a challenge to get as much time in front of them and show them everything that they need to see. So.
Now, do you, as part of your tool bag, have videos and things like that, interactive programs where they can do it at their own speed on their own time?
We don't yet. We have just started something we're calling the micro learnings, little shorter videos that show them how to do particular things. That's one of the projects that we're hoping to get more involved in. But no, the actual interactive stuff, we haven't really done that yet. So we do lots of recordings of training sessions and then make it available to people to view at their own time. But an actual interactive where they and then do the little quizzes, which I love actually, because that really does. No, I mean they have to get engaged with it. So
Right. Now, the reason I ask, for Plus, the librarian group that I'm part of, the Librarian Information Services team at PLI, is really very focused on Plus. We produce that. It's one of our products. And so we've got 6 or 8 little videos, and they're hosted on YouTube, but they're linked on our training center.
Oh, great.
And we also have dozens of flyers, one-page flyers, or in one case, a postcard, a little heavier cardstock if that's something you want to hand out. But we have videos and we have lots of flyers to help with that.
Yeah.
To help with that.
Every time. And, I'm one of the old-fashioned librarians because I really do believe in handouts or some collateral, because when you're not around and an attorney needs to access something to be able to pull, we call them QRGs, quick reference guides. Oh. And we have literally hundreds of quick reference guides that we've created that allows the attorney to walk through the product or the service on his or her own time. And I think that's really helpful. Things like, search tips, or here's where you go for additional training, and all that stuff is outlined in the QRG. We started out of necessity. I have to laugh because some of the vendors have for online tools or products very long reference guides. Sometimes they're 146 pages, and I don't know a single attorney who's ever going to look through something like that for a product or a service. It wants to show all the bells and whistles. And the truth is, if we can boil that down to a couple pager, then that's much more likely to be used. And so that's what we've done. We've taken a lot of the training materials from commercial vendors and made them. I also am a firm believer when training, if an attorney looks at a user guide and then looks at their screen and it doesn't look like their screen,
yep,
then they are already behind the 8 ball. And so we do the screen captures. It means we update these things on a regular basis, and that's always a challenge.
Right.
But I wanted to mirror the offering that we have at Morgan Lewis so that they don't have to stumble around and say, wait, that doesn't look like what I'm seeing.
Right.
And so that's one of the challenges in keeping the QRGs up to date.
Yeah.
And products keep changing names.
Not
But,
ours.
we appreciate that, Karen. We appreciate
No, it used to be Discover Plus, and now it's Plus, but we're not changing it again.
it.
But I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Okay, but here, let me just capture this, okay? Because the nuggets you're talking about, storytelling, quick research guides, training, and did you call them micro videos? Your collection of
Micro learnings.
micro learnings. Oh, I like
And
that.
that was also a play on Morgan Lewis ML,
Oh,
so Morgan Lewis micro learnings. But I think that's a standard. I'm starting to see that more. The little shorter
yep,
videos
yep.
are starting to be used. So, and again, I'm of the, I don't know, more and more people want shorter videos
Mhm.
rather than a handout or a guide. And they're certainly, easier to access. What I find frustrating is even though they're short, you can't go to exactly in a handout. I can scroll through and go to the part that I need. In a video, it's not quite the same, but it's more engaging than a handout. So I get
But
it.
you can stop it. I mean, you can tell
Yes,
it,
you can stop. Yeah,
and then you can hit the button that takes you back 10 seconds. I did quite a bit
yeah,
of that
yeah.
this week.
That's true.
No, we just launched the Evercurrent link, and so we just are building the video for that, and so I
Nah,
was reviewing the pilot for that and getting it to go back 10 seconds, 10 seconds. No, I gotta tell you a Morgan Lewis Bockius story. So this is years ago, and, firms had websites, and so I took it for granted that your website was MLB.com.
oh,
So I went to MLB.com, and it wasn't Morgan Lewis and Bockius, it was Major League
right.
Baseball. So this is when Connie was still, in charge in Philly, and Linda Jean was still there. I think they're retired now. But I told them the story, and they said, yeah, we did have it. We did have it. But Major League Baseball was a client. And so we
Right.
decided that we would, let them have that.
All their email addresses, Morgan's was MLB.com. And
Right.
so, yeah, they
Exactly.
basically,
Had to change everything. I
is
thought
that
that
funny?
was very funny. So now it's Morgan Lewis, but I still think of it like I even wrote down, what is engagement at MLB? Because that's still how I think of you guys. No, but it's a wonderful group. So I was going to ask you how your different firm library environments differed with respect to the expectations of the patrons or the services that you guys offered. And some of that is couched in it was a different time, and now
It
we've
was a
got,
different time. Yeah.
but still you and patrons and things. You want to visit that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've told you, I am at the end of my career. I'm about to retire shortly, which is very exciting.
Yep.
But I've been a law librarian for 38 years, 39 years,
Right.
a member of AALL for 38 years, which is pretty long time. And starting in DC, when I was a solo librarian or a branch librarian, right, for Kelly Dryan Warren in DC, all roads led through DC. So when you're a DC librarian, back then anyway, you worked for the entire firm. If they needed a bill from the Hill, that was the way you got it. When the Supreme Court released an opinion, we had U.S. Law Week, which released
Yeah.
that week, right? But if you needed it immediately, you sent a runner to the Supreme Court to get the printed version.
Right.
You were only, as far as a reference librarian goes, you were only as good as your Rolodex. You knew somebody who could answer questions in these agencies. There was no internet, there were no websites, there was no.
Right.
So really, you had to find people who were helpful and willing to answer questions or guide you along. And so it was really challenging, but it was also wonderfully enjoyable too.
Well,
It
it
was like,
was
oh, when you got something that somebody was looking for, hearing or an agency decision or something, some obscure federal government agency, it was quite the accomplishment.
right.
But as a solo librarian, I was the only librarian in the DC office. It also meant balancing the technical services side as well as the
Right.
reference side. Obviously, reference always took precedence because the attorneys needed things quickly. But
Right.
so I loved that. I loved being able to fire on all cylinders and work on that. As things moved online and the internet came, that was a little easier to find some things, having lived through the great consolidation of all of the vendors. I did many years ago, a couple years ago, I did a program for SCAL on the SCAL's 50th anniversary.
Hmm.
I did a kind of history of legal publishing for those people who didn't live through it and showed them the list of the vendors that were available at AALL, exhibitors at AALL, and then they all went through that great consolidation
Right.
of even Matthew Bender.
Right.
Having gone, products and services are still being added all the time. But I think it was really interesting to watch that genesis of being reference was primarily phone-based and print-based,
Right.
and to move to where you're doing more and more online research.
And at Morgan Lewis Bockius now, how much print do you guys have?
Very little. We like to,
Okay.
we do have some just because we have shelves. So we call it the archive collection. But yeah, we really do. And we have signs basically up there in the shelves saying, these are merely for your results, not to be relied upon, that the online environment is. There are some people that are, that are absolutely wedded to print, but it's becoming harder and harder to justify the print costs, and it's hard to find loose leaf filers anymore. It's really
true. It's
a
true.
challenge.
Now, for desk books, office copies, whatever phrase you guys use, do you still get some of those in print, or is that all?
We do still have some of those, yeah.
Okay.
Depending upon the practice group.
Right. Right. Yeah, I always think of it as a spectrum, from all print, which is how it was when we started, and now it's almost fully electronic. No, I remember when that started because I was selling books in DC, and also I had the top half of Virginia, everything down to Highway 64. And I was in Fredericksburg calling on a bankruptcy attorney, Jim Kelly. And he said, "Oh, I don't need Collier. I've got this bankruptcy set from Clark Boardman Callahan." And I said, "Jim, you can't possibly have something from Clark Boardman Callahan. Those are two different companies." And that was the beginning. So this had to be like 1990.
Right.
I did the same thing when I started at PLI, created a PowerPoint called Legal Publishing because people that didn't live through it don't really know about it.
Well, and part of I do it just for fun, but in this presentation, I show them the original print shepherds, because it was like
You have
learning a foreign language. Remember, it was like
Yes.
all these numbers and codes and symbols, and it's like,
Well, and don't forget the little
then you have to get
stickies.
the red book and the gold book and all
Yeah.
the stuff to be able to shepherdize. And
Right.
so it was a foreign language back then.
It
I
was.
used to say, and I still think it's true, that, a regular librarian, when somebody is looking for something and they're not familiar with the library, they can stumble in to a public library and eventually figure it out, right? There's an online catalog, or there's something they can peruse and see the outline of books on the shelf and figure out how things are organized. But if you were not familiar with law at all, to walk into a law library and see, for example, the reporters, how do you get into those, or to see, that all that other stuff? You need somebody to point out, back then, the digests and all that stuff. It was, and shepherds. Like, you looked at that and you'd say, "What is this? I need somebody to tell me how to interpret this, because I don't know what this means." So it was an interesting thing. I had the good fortune to go to DC and get a job. My last couple of classes for my library degree, Catholic had a specialization in legal research.
Oh.
So I took the legal research classes, and that helped open that stuff up for me. It was really a wonderful opportunity for me to learn it and then put it into practice, because I was working in a law firm at the time.
Right.
But all of a sudden, the big rows of books made sense, and I figured out how to use it. So,
It's funny. I was talking the other day, I guess Wednesday, with a librarian, and for the newer attorneys, where they don't really know what a digest is, and they don't know about the history of shepherds, or they go online and they enter a legal resource, and all they have is a title, and they don't know that it's 47 volumes or just a paperback. And you can't always tell from the table of contents,
Right,
because it
that's right.
depends on the level of detail. She and I were talking about how if they don't have the bigger picture, they don't know what that resource is good for.
Right.
And I would argue that the digests and the Shepherd's books, have been completely transformed. All you need to do now is just, shepherdize this case,
Right.
or,
right.
give me some cases on this topic. But they were state of the art at the time. I
It
mean,
really
my God,
was.
a digest and shepherds. Oh my God, Frank Shepard out of Colorado Springs can tell you if that case is still good or not. It's astonishing. And
Well, I have a picture of myself and another librarian at Crowell and Mooring putting reporters on the shelf. And I'm ecstatic because we had just bought all the regional reporters. And for a firm to make that leap into having all of the regional reporters meant they were big enough to justify the expense and the size of the library and stuff. And remember, the alternative was to actually go to a physical law library or borrow an interlibrary loan,
a volume.
individual case volume. So I have pictures of me shelving like, we have the regional reporters, and how exciting that was.
Right.
So, and now, of course, within a relatively short period of time, all that moved online, and it was not necessary. But
wasn't such a short period of time. I mean, I guess it was from the time that John West started with the reporters till the time they went online was a pretty good span of time.
Yeah,
but our entry coincided with the point where it was where the transition was beginning.
Right. When I started, there was the Westlaw had the Walt 2, so the Westlaw Automated Legal Terminal, and they didn't have they were just showing the head notes for their cases because they didn't want to eat into their print. So you could then see the head notes and then go to the print to pull things up. So it didn't even have all 50 states.
Wow.
The Lexis, the Lexis was Lexis Deluxe terminal was a huge piece of furniture.
This red machine.
Yeah, the little Ubix came later, but the big.
Right. And that little screen was, tiny, like 4 inches by 5 inches.
So do I sound like that old man sitting on the porch going, in my day? Because having lived through all of that it was interesting. It was an interesting time.
It was great. And we sort of, grew with it and got to see everything. So given all that change and given where we are now, and you guys really do, office copies and desk books and maybe a few large treatises for the senior partners, I'm guessing.
Right.
What do you see as new trends? What do you expect to see as new trends in libraries?
Well, I mean, I liked and was thrilled with the move toward practical guidance materials. I think that was a great trend, right? A recognition that attorneys needed more practical stuff to help them, not to get right into the sample clauses and checklists and, all timing tips, all that stuff that makes it easier to practice law. And watching the vendors surface that material is great. Of course, we're right on the cusp, Karen, of AI and how that's going to change everything. I'm both excited to see where it is and also relieved that I'm retiring shortly because I think it's going to change everything. But ultimately, you're still going to need, human beings looking at things and making evaluations and that kind of stuff. It's not going to eliminate the need for librarians or lawyers. It's just going to change.
How do you think it's going to change? Like, how would you predict the future of law librarians?
Well, I think it's just going to be easier it'll make connections. So in a way that we don't now. So an example of that is, and you're looking at the AI tools that are available now from our commercial legal vendors.
Right.
And rather than the silo of having to go here for cases and here for practical guidance and here for secondary sources, to have a tool where you enter a search and it pulls all that information in a summary and then gives you those resources underneath that you can jump to. That's amazing. That's so exciting. That summary thing is something that you couldn't do when those resources were siloed, but AI will look at it and say, well, here's our best answer based on all of this information. That's pretty exciting.
That is
then,
huge.
Of course, you have to take that and do something with it. It doesn't complete the circle, right? You actually have to take it and then formulate a legal argument or whatever. So it's not an end in itself, but it's a really good start and something that, at least from a training perspective, helps. I used to see people just spin their wheels. Like, I don't know where to go for this. I can see the case law. I can go to, and we always wanted to send them to secondary sources. That's a huge plus. Librarians know that. They don't necessarily learn that in some law schools, They're focused on the case law and interpreting that. But secondary sources will open that stuff up for them and make it much easier to understand. So if we can get them to the secondary sources and put it in context and summarize it, man, that's half the battle.
Right. Well, when you were talking about silos before, I was thinking, so, before we had AI, before we had it so commonly available, looking at case law and looking at statutes and looking at the problem, what they had to do was synthesize it and think. There was no summary. They had to think it through and write it out, really. And now you're saying there's a starting point, there's a tool, I think is what you're saying.
Yes, I always have to laugh because when I worked for Lexis and Lexis would make improvement, we did the natural language. We introduced natural language, and
Searching.
I got a lot of pushback from some librarians that saying we were dumbing down legal research. And my argument was always like, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to get into the results that they're looking for. Remember, the legal research isn't the end in of itself. It's really, you have to find the material and then you have to do something with it, right? And then you have to, to formulate your argument and whatever, create a brief. So the challenge shouldn't be finding the material. Let's make that as easy as possible. If that's dumbing down research, well, then let's dumb it down so they can get to what they need. And then they have to do the work of legal analysis and formulating their argument.
Right, the thinking part.
Yeah, the thinking part's still there. It's just that they're not going to have to learn Boolean. As a librarian, of course, I love Boolean search. I will always love Boolean searching. But if we can make it easier by allowing people to search by natural language, why not?
Right.
I think whatever lowers that barrier to the information, the better off we are. So
it sounds like you're thinking of AI as a tool, as a useful tool moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know people are afraid of it, but I think ultimately there'll always be room for good librarians and good lawyers, people who use it and train with it and not see it as a threat. So,
does it remind you of any tool in the past that came to the legal world?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting having lived through the time where knowledge management was the phrase that everybody was talking about because it was a recognition that that law firms especially have this great body of knowledge that their attorney work product, and being able to get into that and use it, reuse it, harness the power of that. I have a little soapbox I'll try not to get onto,
okay.
but I think we as librarians really, many of us missed that opportunity. Unfortunately, I think they're the right people to be involved in knowledge management. We have that information management organization of information. We know that it's not all technology. Many times, though, when that first came into the legal environment, the IT people were taking over knowledge management. You're like, yes, you can apply technology to it. That's absolutely a piece of the puzzle. But the underlying information is ours as librarians. And I think, although there's lots and lots of people out there who've moved into librarians who've moved into knowledge management roles and have the title and the responsibilities in their firms. But I think in many firms, they went the technology side rather than the information side. And I think that was a shame. And it really was kind of a mixture of challenges. I want to say that in some cases, librarians were just already working so hard and didn't want to take on the additional responsibility or didn't understand how they could fit neatly into those roles. And so that's a different story.
Right. Let's talk about AALL and the fact that you've been really active. And I think that you said part of that was Lexis, the time at Lexis. They were encouraging you. You were doing lots of training. You were doing lots of presenting. But you've been a member of a bunch of different committees. And this is your AALL printout. It is lengthy.
Yeah.
It is lengthy.
I think I've been on every committee at one point or another, even some special committees.
Right.
But early on, my very first library job, I have a story to tell you, though, before I jump into my first job. I was one of those. I had most of my library degree. I had a couple of classes left, and I started applying to every kind of library that I could find. Medical librarian. I've always dreamt of being an archivist. That's my dream. I didn't care. I just wanted a job, right? And I landed in a law library. And
Thank
as
God.
I know, it was absolutely the best place for me because, as I said, then I was able to take the remaining legal research classes. But I had a boss at the time, Suzanne Zumbro, who Suzanne Geringer was her name at the time, and she was active in AALL and encouraged me to get involved. And so from the very beginning, I had no experience and no knowledge. And she said, get on a committee, volunteer, do this, do that.
Right.
And so I did. And so from the very beginning, I was on the publications committee or something. And you go, I don't even know what that. But I had a great time. And the thing about that is it exposed me to our profession. It got me really excited about it. I was PLL chair for a year, long before.
Yes.
And here's the really funny thing that shows you how old I am. One of the issues we were dealing with was trying to get librarians access to the internet because not everybody had access, and we were trying to ensure that librarians had access. And then after that, I got to be the program chair for the Anaheim annual meeting. It was a really exciting experience to do that. We tried to think outside the box, and we were very innovative in that regard. So just had lots of opportunities to volunteer, and I highly encourage anybody who's getting started in the profession to volunteer. You get to meet people from all different types of libraries and all across the world, really.
Right.
And it's certainly enriched my life. I can't say enough good things about being involved. I've been involved in the local level as well with the various chapters of AALL and been very involved in SCAL in the last couple of years. So I love that. I think it really does add to the profession and adds to our enjoyment of the profession as well, getting to interact with librarians.
I just want to specify SCAL is Southern California Association of Law Librarians. No, we use all these acronyms. And, I said to a librarian who see you in Chicago, and somebody that was standing nearby said, what's in Chicago? I was like, oh, it's our shorthand.
That's right.
So you've covered some nuggets, and I appreciate that. I've tried to capture some of them. Are there other important learnings that you would want to share with fellow law librarians?
I have often said that we are in a very exciting profession, and that I am passionate about it. I hope my colleagues are passionate about it. If you don't feel passion about your job or about your profession, then
do something else.
Yeah, maybe there's another place for you, because I just can't imagine going through 38 years of my profession without being excited about it. I really think I'm a very fortunate man to have found this niche and to have enjoyed it as much as I did. It's going to be bittersweet. Ready to work in my garden. I'm ready to travel. I'm ready to do a lot of other things, but it's going to be bittersweet because I do enjoy seeing the profession change and the challenges that are coming up. So.
No, you and I've been very fortunate too. I've been blessed to have dropped into this thing from the other side.
But, right.
But then, welcomed to be a part of the community. It's a lovely group. Anything I wish you had known when you started out as a law librarian?
How fast it goes by. That's why you got to enjoy it.
Yeah.
It really does. So, but I've also had the good fortune, as I said, of going to AALL. And one of the things that I recommend is for people who are there to not just stick to their own types of library programs, but that it's really important to see challenges in other types of libraries, and you can extrapolate that lesson into your own type of libraries. But I think many times we think along these rigid lines, and in fact, many of our colleagues have moved back and forth from academic environment to firms to corporate, whatever, or government library. So I do think that being open to learning opportunities outside of your individual type of library is really important, and to try to go to the annual meeting. One more story and I'll stop. I used to write a column for AALL newsletter long before Spectrum came out. It was called the AALL newsletter, and I had a column called Current Comments. And it was really fun. I got to comment on whatever came up in my head. And at one point, I made an passionate argument for paying for you to go to AALL, even if you had to pay for it out of your own pocket, or your employer didn't pay, because it's really important to be all that. And then about 3 months later, the firm I was working with collapsed, basically. And I was suddenly facing going to AALL without an employer.
On your own nickel.
On my own nickel. And I had to put my words to the test. I did it. And I was really glad I did, because that put me in touch with a librarian who was in San Francisco, who alerted me to the Couder brothers job. So in the end, I wound up getting my next job based on that information. But it was so funny to actually, within a couple of weeks after saying it, by golly, I didn't think I was really going to be forced to follow my own advice. But I do still feel passionate about that. I think that there's just so many opportunities out there to learn and to interact with people. And if there's any way to get to the annual meeting, I think it's really important. So I'm going to miss going to the annual meeting. So.
That would be glad to see you. Michael, it's been a pleasure to see you. We've been friends a long time. It's nice to spend an hour with you. And I thank you for joining us. And seriously, thank you for the nuggets, quick research, quick reference guides, and training, and micro-learnings, and storytelling, and AI as summaries. These are wonderful sharings.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to The Practicing Law Librarian, part of PLI's Ever Current podcast. Be sure to subscribe and listen to our latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. And to learn more about the Practicing Law Institute, please visit pli.edu. To learn more about PLI Plus, which provides electronic access to the full collection of PLI Press publications, and schedule a demo with a member of our team, please visit pli.edu/plus. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI.